Don McLeroy, followed by Franklin Mail.
Well, thank you. Even though these biology books are full of unsubstantiated dogmatic statements supporting evolution, there are still two major reasons why you should adopt these books. First, by so doing, you will strike the final blow to the teaching of evolution. There are some hidden jewels in these texts just waiting to be mined by inquisitive students that can destroy evolution. In 2009, when the board adopted these new science standards, the evolutionists were painted into a corner. The authors were required to provide scientific evidence for explanations of the sudden appearance and stasis of groups in the fossil record and the complexity of the cell, and most importantly, to identify the specific pages where they were to do so. These sections are the hidden jewels. In the following week, American Association for the Advancement of Science reported new science standards for Texas schools strike a major blow to the teaching of evolution. The adoption of these books represents the final blow because despite their boastful assertions of robust evidence for evolution, when you actually read those identified sections, the hidden jewels, you will find the evidence incredibly weak to non-existent. And if there's no evidence, there's no evolution. Science, test explanations, classically with controlled experiments and historically by collecting evidence. Genetics is an excellent example of classical testability. Mendel, in 1865, after growing 29,000 pea plants, empirically deduced the laws of inheritance. Continental drift is an excellent example of historical testability. The obvious fit of the coastlines of Africa and South America, similar geologic formations, discovery of the mid-Atlantic ridge and seafloor spreading make a convincing argument. Likewise, evolution is tested historically. Evolutionists need a lot of evidence. How much? Simply they must provide enough to explain the origin of everything else in the book. Here's one book's index. 4,000 items. Here is one item, biochemical complexity. How much evidence do the authors provide? They just wave their magic wand of words and come up with some simple explanations. Just so stories. The second reason I ask you to adopt these books is because they happen consistently coincidentally to support what the Bible says. The Bible says God created all life after their kind. What we see in the world around us supports what the Bible says. We see a myriads of things that replicate themselves and can be organized into distinct classifications.
Dr. McLeroy, go ahead and finish. Since you were a former board member, we'll let you finish.
Well, I only got about 20 seconds.
That's true.
Not only does, okay. What we see in the world around us supports what the Bible says. But what we see in these books supports what the Bible says. Test it for yourself. Open it random, any page, and ask yourself if the description and illustration you find supports the claims of the Bible or of evolution. Even the units on evolution support what the Bible says, because as demonstrated, they don't even support evolution. Ironically, evolutionists argue that creationists want to force their religious views in the text, but just the teaching of biology does that, and teaching evolution demonstrates that's not how God did it. Since true testable science trumps dogmatism, strike the final blow to the teaching of evolution, support the Bible, and adopt these books. Thank you.
Okay. Questions, board members? Mrs. Knight.
That's fine. Y'all put that up.
Could you clarify for me,
Mike, yeah. Red button. These are new mics, audience. That's why we're learning.
could you clarify for me, Dr. McLeroy, when you say adopt these books, which books are you talking about?
All of them. If you look on the reverse side of the page, or that first page I gave you, those are the areas of the main publishers, areas that have to deal with sudden appearance and stasis and the complexity of the cell. I want you to adopt these books because if you read those sections and those pages, they have to at least give a hint to the origin of everything else in the biology book. And they're weak. You test things in science. We have a definition of science that was also included in our new standards. It says science is the use of evidence to make testable explanations. You test it two ways in science. Historically, it's the way you test evolution. You cannot evolve something in a lab. I mean, you can claim some stuff, but you don't evolve a new cat or something like that in the lab. You're going to have to look at the historical evidence. We have identified, those are the hidden jewels in our books. Read those pages. I've read them. They're weak. In the fossil record, they talk about sudden appearance and stasis. where they tried to explain it. One publisher doesn't even deal with it. They ignore it in their 50% rule. But the ones that do talk about punctuated equilibrium. Well, that was an idea to try to get around the idea that the fossil record does not support evolution. And then if you look at the complexity of the cell, they talk about one cell swallows another cell and somehow acquires that cell that gets swallowed up, then becomes a chloroplast, becomes a nucleus, becomes a mitochondria. That's weak. They have no evidence of how it did it. And on that chart that I had displayed, I read evolutionist books. This Jerry Coyne in Why Evolution is True, in trying to explain biochemical complexity. This is a book he wrote just 2 years ago about the evidence for evolution, and all you see in there is he says there was a common ancestor of fibrinogen. One little word on that entire 27 square foot chart. He highlights one molecule, fibrinogen, an imaginary common ancestor of a sea cucumber and all us vertebrates, all of us with backbones.
Okay, Mrs. Knight, did that answer your
That's
question?
weak.
Well, no.
Let's a student see how weak it is.
What was your question? No, I know your question.
Let the little, go ahead.
For the books under Hidden Jewels, and you've got the publishers, the 3 publishers, are you saying adopt these books facetiously?
No.
These are the ones that address.
No, if you look at the other part of the handout, I gave you 2 articles from Science Magazine.
Okay.
Right after we passed these standards 4.5 years ago. When we passed these standards, there was a news story that said, and this is the AAAS, American Association for Advancement of Science. It's their top science journal, weekly journal in the world, one of the top. You can't get much better than this. In their news story, they said, new science standards for Texas schools strike a major blow to the teaching of evolution. 2 weeks later, they interviewed me and one of the authors of the book, and they ran another second story. And in that story, the evolutionists predicted, this has a chance for us to show the robustness of evolutionary theory. I predicted, I can't wait for these books to come out. I've been waiting for 4.5 years. It's 4.5 years later, the books are out. Let the students, the inquisitive students, the ones that are not blind, look at the evidence in these books. They don't even give a hint to explain the complexity. They have to explain the origin of everything else in the book. This is awesome. Let's get these books to the kids. Let them see it. Let that little young student in the classroom say, is this all the evidence that they can give? Maybe, that's why I think it'll strike a major blow to teaching of evolution, and this could be the final blow. I'm excited. Put those books in there. I don't like the dogmatism about the books, but I like the fact that we've painted them into a corner, and they have no evidence in those books to support evolution. Adopt them.
Okay,
I'm serious.
other questions? Yes, Mr. Ratliff.
I'm always nice. Okay, I want to make sure I understand your argument. And I promise this isn't a long question. You want us to adopt the books because you believe that the books lack evidence, therefore the books prove that evolution doesn't exist?
I think what we want to do is have our students, using science, if they go to the part of they understand the definition of science, which is in all our new high school science books, it's the use of evidence to make testable explanations. Once they understand what historical science is, like that you show continental drift, one simple separation with 4 facts. Well, how many facts do you need to show evolution? I mean, it's in the billions and trillions and trillions. Well, there should be, at least in those sections to explain it, that should be there. But they're not there. And so I'm just hoping a young creationist, young Thomas Ratliff, that's a creationist, will sit there and say, look, is this all the evidence they have? Well, maybe God didn't use evolution to do it.
Okay, let me ask you another question. In the AAAS science journal that you mentioned, the new science standards for Texas schools strike a major blow to the teaching of evolution. Isn't that a different statement than strikes a major blow to evolution?
Of course.
So the standard striking a blow as to how it is taught is different than the scientific journal saying that evolution has had a major blow dealt to it.
Well, yeah, but I'll take either one, whatever words that guy
because it seemed as though you were implying that the Journal of Science was saying
Well,
that
I think we
evolution
can-
is...
Okay, let's stick to the books since
Yeah,
we're
yeah,
here to
that's
talk
fine.
about
No.
the textbooks instead of a journal.
Okay, so,
Well, anyway,
so your position is that these books prove that evolution doesn't happen and you want us to adopt them?
no. I did not say prove. I just say the evidence is weak.
Okay, thank you.
I don't prove anything. I may be wrong.
Okay, any other questions? All right. Thank you, Dr. McLeroy.
Thanks. Thank you all.